Good day and welcome to this Focus On segment. We are here at the Mining Indaba 2023, the world's largest mining investors conference, where several heads of state and the private mining sector gathered to discuss the current policies and quite possible policy changes that will impact the future of mining.
Your own drive to reduce your carbon emissions, 30% by 2030 is what you have stated in the public. Ultimately, what does that mean for your clients?
So we've made a commitment to reduce our carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. What that means is that essentially we are reducing the carbon footprint of our products. This will be a positive for our customers because they will also then be using products that are much cleaner, that have a lower carbon footprint and that have less emissions. And we think this is an essential part of their own decarbonization journey. So we see ourselves as supporting our customers on their own decarbonization journey.
And what are the processes involved there in producing more sustainable fuels for your various customers, from agriculture to even mining? Just take us through the back end process of what that means and what that will demand from yourselves.
So today, if we think about fuels, in general, they are based on what we call fossils, so be it coal or crude oil as a feedstock. What we are doing is progressively reducing that. In the interim, we will use natural gas, which is a much cleaner fuel and resulting in less emissions. But over the long term, what we want to look at is we have technology that is feedstock agnostic, so we can start looking at sustainable carbon sources to feed as a feedstock into our process. And then we also need renewables as a big input to help decarbonize our own operations. So we've already publicly stated that we are procuring close to 300 megawatts of renewable power, and that we will feed into our operations, which will result in products that have less emissions, less of a carbon footprint. And that we will then supply our customers, and it helps them in their own decarbonization journey.
And you're looking to do that by placing a significant emphasis on developing green hydrogen and the green hydrogen economy here in South Africa specifically. Just talk to us about what that looks like and what that entails.
Indeed. So as Sasol, as you say, we've made the commitment to net zero by 2050, and we believe that green hydrogen will be an essential part of delivering that for ourselves as well as our customers. So let me start about how we see it for ourselves. Firstly, we're looking at decarbonizing our own operations. And what that would entail would be renewables as feedstock, and then electrolyzer capacity, which we will then use to convert sustainable carbon that will produce sustainable products. And sustainable products for us, we believe, would be green hydrogen, which will be a future energy carrier for heavy-duty industry, which is very relevant to the mining Indaba, because we see mining customers transitioning to that. A second bit of that would be in the aviation space. As Sasol, we are looking at producing sustainable aviation fuel, another area that's very difficult to decarbonize, but we believe we have the technology as well as the know-how to help decarbonize that. We've already formed a partnership with others where we are looking at producing that sustainable aviation fuel in South Africa, targeting as early as 2025. And then lastly, other industries that can be also transitioned in a similar manner would be looking at marine, for instance, and looking at production of green ammonia that can then be used as an energy carrier for the shipping industry. And again, we are looking to work with partners to enable that.
Do you foresee any challenges in your journey to 2050? And do you also foresee any further investments, monetary investments that may need to be made other than the ones that are already on the table?
It is, of course, a challenging commitment that we are making, but we do believe that it is possible. It will need investments, both financial and in resources in terms of employment of people. So what would be the challenges that we see for today? If we think about some of the targets that we've set, it would require an immense investment in renewables. So in the meantime, while we have committed in the market to increase renewables by 1,200 megawatts up to 2030, we will need a lot more to get us to our 2050 targets. So we will have to think about the infrastructure to move that renewable power. We would have to think that the grid as it is today is able to move that renewable power, for instance, in the areas of the Eastern Cape and Northern Cape where we have an abundance of renewable sources, but that has to be moved closer to markets as well as closer to customers, and that can only be done with a lot of investment. The second part is that we will need about how the people who are working in mines today, we transition them in a just manner to be employed in those kind of sectors, in the production of renewables, also in our own operations as we transition when we start producing sustainable products.
Does the just transition as it pertains to jobs, does it mean no job losses, or does it mean a potential redeployment and a reallocation of workers into jobs that perhaps haven't even been created yet, as you and I have this conversation?
We would see it more as a just transition that will require possibly reskilling of people to work in some of these newer technologies, be it electrolyzers, be it renewable energy production, be it in our own operations as we shift to making different type of products. So we would hope that we will transition people to have these new skills, new capabilities that are required to produce sustainable products.
In our space, we form part of the Sasol chemical portfolio, and part of that, if you start talking a just transition, start saying that we have existing businesses, and by us continuing to support, and in this case when we talk mining, the extraction of the metals we need to use for the new economies, by us continuing to do that responsibly and enabling those businesses to continue is a big part of that just transition. So we are part of Sasol, so we form part of that decarbonization and those energy solutions, but specifically in the mining products, we continue to support the miners to efficiently apply explosives into their mining operations. And the big opportunity there is then explosives usage is still one of the most efficient ways of breaking rock in certain mining applications. So if we can optimize blasting, optimize the use of explosives, it is actually a sustainable way in transitioning into this just future.
It's day 3 of the Mining Indaba, and you've been listening to the several opportunities that perhaps some of your mining customers have been talking about at the conference, as well as some of the challenges under this theme of increasing security and increasing their supply and also ensuring stability. How does Sasol relate to that, and what role do you see yourselves playing in helping your clients achieve some of those things?
Well, firstly, let me say it's been good over the last 3 days to hear about all the growth plans. It links to your first question. So it does seem that there's a bright future for mining, which is always a good place to start. Then there's been lots of conversations on how to decarbonize, and where then Sasol is really well positioned in terms of the energy solutions as an input to a lot of these mines, and a lot of discussion on what are the new energy carriers going forward as well. Thinking about what everyone seems to be grappling with exactly what is the right mix and how we work together to make that happen. But I'm very hopeful with a lot of the conversations are about partnerships. How do we do it in a sustainable manner? And I think everyone is starting to see that you're probably not going to do this alone. It works well if you try and find something that everyone can take part of going forward. And I mean, if you then start looking at some of the wonderful projects that we've heard about where people have started to generate electricity or more renewable, less carbon intensive sources of energy, firstly for security of supply to the mines, which translates into security of supply on the minerals, and then regrettably we still have to grapple with some of the challenges that we face to get those minerals either beneficiated or to the ports.
Sure, I was actually going to ask that question exactly. Some of the logistical challenges that have been front and center at this particular Indaba, and what degree that relates to your business also.
So, specifically in our explosives space, the transport infrastructure, ports and railways are definitely something that is impacting locally, but globally the logistics chains have been pressurized through COVID and some of the conflicts that's currently in the world. So it is definitely more difficult to source materials easily. But secondly as well, I think some of the financial turmoil is playing a bit of havoc in terms of inflationary pressures on input materials, that type of stuff. So South Africa is not immune to what happens in the world. South Africa's got our own challenges, but we're not immune to what's happening in the rest of the world. But that's where I think Sasol, with a lot of their established capacities, many of them inland, I think offer a lot of our customers some wonderful opportunities for security of supply, because we're actually local, so it's made in South Africa, but it's also closer. It's not as constrained to the ports directly in terms of the product transports and those aspects.
How do you assess the current security landscape as Sasol, as it does pertain to your company?
Broadly, South Africa is a net importer of energy products. Diesel, as an example, specifically, we're a net importer. So I think Sasol is probably one of the few countries that are still involved in the manufacturing of fuel products. We do that in Mpumalanga, in Secunda, and we think there's a part of a just energy transition story there. The other area we do it is in crude refining in Sasolburg, where we still operate a crude-based refinery, and we believe those two manufacturing bases in the inland are a good solution towards energy security for the country. But of course they are not sufficient to fully address it, so there will be a level of imports that are required. And as Sasol, and together with other players in the industry, we import refined fuel from many places in the world, and that is transported to our customers as required.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that perhaps there's an opportunity to rethink and just relook the model of importation, particularly the level of imports that are coming through right now? Do you think that as we talk about the just energy transition, and as we talk about increasing energy supply and increasing security, that there's an opportunity for more refinery activities to take place here in South Africa? And is that a conversation that Sasol would be having or having with other stakeholders?
Well, we think that refining and manufacturing in general is necessary for the country. It is a big element of creating jobs. It is a big part of a just energy transition. So we think certainly refining still has a space in the country, but understandably many industry players will make different decisions based on their shareholder needs. For ourselves, we are still committed to manufacturing of refined products in the country. In that regard, as Sasol, we are investing in upgrading our refineries to make cleaner fuels, starting firstly with Secunda, where we have publicly announced that we will commit funds to convert that facility to make cleaner fuels as prescribed by the government for those to be met by 2027. We are also looking at options of how we can produce those same cleaner fuels for our crude refinery in Sasolburg, and that is work in progress that we will be able to communicate in the near future.